Hey guys, today I want to talk a little bit about season one. I'm not really mad or even disappointed with the changes. Honestly, at this point, I'm just kind of confused as to why a lot of them even happened. Um, I don't know, man. I just don't really understand what the direction of the game is with these changes and how they're actually going to help the long term health of the game. And why they felt like it's just such a massive nerf around the board to basically the whole game was necessary so early. I understand trying to combat power creep, but it just doesn't feel good, I think, to combat power creep this hard so early into a game's lifespan. I would have rather they just like either make the game harder or just, let it go crazy like that because it is a little bit much. So let's kind of go through some of the changes and why I disagree with them and why I'm not really sure what's happening. I'm going to try to make some guesses at what the goal is, but they're not going to be good. First off, they're trying to hit survivability. I don't know why. I just really don't understand. Right now in Diablo, there's only two ways that you die, and that's either you get crowd controlled and you die within the crowd control, or you get one shot. And so, especially in the high nightmare dungeons, you're constantly getting one shot, even by stuff off screen. So they decided to nerf survivability. I don't really understand why. But they want to move power over to offensive instead. So I think you're kind of like you're just gonna get one shot more often now. And I guess glass cannon builds are gonna be like the new meta. So have fun if you're not playing a range class. Like good luck, I guess. Um, they also decided to nerf cooldown reduction. So for example, unstoppable cooldown is going to be a lot harder to get now, and you're going to be running in circles waiting for your cooldowns to come up. You're also just not doing damage if your build is reliant on cooldowns. It's still going to be like a really important stat. It's just you're just not using it as much. And this sucks because it's not just affecting your survivability, it's not just affecting your damage, but it's also affecting like the overall feel of your build. The fun aspect is also being affected because it's just not fun running around for a couple seconds doing no damage waiting for your cooldowns to come back up. Nobody enjoys that. And I don't know why they would hit cooldown reduction like this as well. Now, I guess the idea here is they want to make you stronger, right? They want to, I guess, encourage you to be a more glass cannon build. But first off, this already feels really bad in Diablo 4 when, again, things are just one-shotting you constantly in the higher content. But now also, like, your damage just also got nerfed a lot too. They hit vulnerable and crit damage pretty hard across the board. I mean, you're seeing 40% reduction to vulnerable. Now, I think the idea here is that they didn't like that vulnerable is a requirement and all of your damage comes from the vulnerable window. But I don't think this is the way to go. This just feels like a pretty massive nerf to your character for pretty much every build that relies on vulnerable, which is like 95% of builds. The kind of annoying part here is that vulnerable is still going to be a requirement. Every single build is still going to be running vulnerable. In fact, now point for point, it's actually the most important stat in the game because of the way that damage buckets work. You have a multiplier, right? You have your kind of like all of your base damage, and that's multiplied by crit, and that's multiplied by vulnerable. So if they nerf the hell out of crit and they nerf the hell out of vulnerable, now every point for point, vulnerable is like your most important stat. So in the Paragon board, for example, you will have to get every single crit damage node and you'll have to get every single vulnerable damage node. That's like a non-negotiable at this point. Those two boards are like the most important boards in the entire game now, bar none. They're so good. And I don't think that's really good. Vulnerable, again, is still going to be a really important stat. A lot of your damage is still going to come in your vulnerable window. So none of that's really been fixed. It just feels like overall your power level has kind of gone down. And I think the really frustrating thing here is like, it just doesn't feel good to just do less damage, but you're still building vulnerable. And it also makes it like not that interesting in terms of your build diversity because, at least for me, for my Barbarian build, when I was fully optimized, I actually had about 400% vulnerable, 400% crit, and about 400% in that last like conditional bucket. So like damage to slow, damage to crowd control, all of that added up actually was about the same. So at that point, at my fully optimized Barbarian, it was actually about 1-to-1. All the points were about equals. And there were actually times where something like damage to close was actually a better stat than vulnerable damage, believe it or not. And now that's not the case. Every point of vulnerable is stronger than every point of crit, which is stronger than every point of the other one. Now they did buff like the main bucket. So all the conditionals like damage to slow, damage to elites, that's all one big bucket, and that did get buffed. But that's just bloating it further. It's making it less valuable. And also, it's making it harder to compare gear because now instead of comparing like, okay, 30% vulnerable damage to 30% close damage, you're comparing like, okay, I have 20% vulnerable versus 35% close. So I got to do the math and see how my multipliers affect because vulnerable is more important than close. But if I over bloat close, it's actually harder now to evaluate gear than it was before for like no actual change. Just making the game like needlessly more complicated and actually like less fun for me as far as gearing goes. So I don't know. I just think this is like a huge miss. Personally, I think that if they don't want vulnerable in the game, which is fine. If you don't want vulnerable, that's okay. I think vulnerable is awful for the game. I think it's just either cut it entirely or just make it like a small conditional that gives you like 20% extra damage, and you can maybe buff that up to like 30 or 40%, but they should actually make it so that like it doesn't scale well. It's not doubling or tripling your damage because I still have like 300% vulnerable damage. Okay, so I mean, overall, it's still a very important stat. You're still running it on like all of your gear that can run it. On top of that, we also saw some pretty major nerfs to the classes as well. I know that Barbarian received some nerfs, mainly to one of their most important, the strongest passive that they had, Hamstring. The cool thing about Hamstring is you could apply slows to all enemies, which would trigger conditionals off crowd controlled enemies. Now you can't do that. It only applies to healthy enemies. So it's basically completely it sucks now. And that kind of blows because now my whole barb kind of does like no damage anymore. I have to like completely change it, and I'm not going to re-gear my Barbarian when the new season comes out tomorrow. So that sucks for Barbarian. I'm sure a lot of the other classes got similar stuff like that. Pretty major nerfs to like fundamental parts of a build. And I think like the really weird part about that was they also nerfed Sorcerer. I was not expecting Sorcerer to get nerfed. Like, I don't know, is the guy that plays Sorcerer, is this the same person who likes motion controls in video games? Because like I don't think they are making Sorcerer fun. I feel like they always add these like weird negative effects to abilities that aren't actually fun to use. It's like you're designing a game, but you're not actually play testing to see if it works. And Sorcerer right now just doesn't work. I don't understand how Sorcerer didn't get like massive buffs. And I think maybe they just didn't have time to like fundamentally change the mechanics. But if that's the case, if they can't fundamentally change the game mechanics or class mechanics, then they shouldn't have nerfed it this hard. And if you are going to push people off a cliff, I think you have to give them something to latch onto. And quite honestly, I just didn't see a lot of things that really struck my attention of like, oh, damn, this is like a really cool new build that I can try out. Or like, wow, this got massively more damage. It tended to be like pretty small changes. So for me personally, it feels like all the season 1 builds are just going to be the preseason builds too. Like there's no real difference. You're just weaker, which kind of sucks. Like there it doesn't I didn't read through the patch notes and feel like, oh wow, this is a really cool new build I want to play. It just never really happened to me. I don't know how it feels for the other classes, but like I'm gonna be playing a rogue next season. I'm just gonna be playing penetrating shot because I didn't really see anything that was that cool open up. And if you're gonna have weaker builds, right, and just overall take the power level down, maybe the idea is that with seasons, so the seasonal like affix or whatever, it kind of buffs your power level back up. And that's totally fair, right? You want to take it down a bit so it doesn't power creep too much. But man, when I looked at some of the seasonal uniques and some of the malignant hearts, they're just not that like inspiring. And I think the only thing worse than being like a weak seasonal affix is to be like a boring seasonal affix. And I looked at a lot of these uniques, I looked at a lot of the malignant hearts, and like very, very few of them actually struck my attention. If you look at the uniques, for example, you only got one for each class. None of the old uniques really got changed. Like there was nothing changed that was like, oh wow, this unique that I have sitting in my stash, all of a sudden I really want to try it out now and use it. The only thing that I saw that got changed for Barbarian was like Gore's got another nerf. What the heck? Like what is happening here? I don't understand. For the new uniques added to the game, we saw a Barbarian unique that's like it's a sword that does frost damage. Why is this even a Barbarian unique? It has nothing to do with Barbarian. They should just added it to the game as a whole. Maybe they felt like Barbarian really needs something to play around with, but like it just does frost damage, which isn't like a Barbarian unique thing. They added another uber rare unique, which like 10 people are gonna get, and it's only necromancers and sorcerers can even get it anyways because it's a staff. But then at the same time, it's not even that good. Like it has a really interesting, cool effect where you get like a shrine power when you kill an elite, but you're giving up a weapon. But it also has a cooldown on it. So like, why does it even have a cooldown if it's so damn rare? Where like only 10 people are gonna get it. Why not make this like a crazy powerful? Like your entire party gets a shrine effect when you kill a rare with no cooldown. Like that could actually be kind of cool in party play. And if you have one, it would be kind of neat. I mean, this just increase the drop rate altogether so that people can actually play around with these instead of like literally the only way you can get it is because a Helltide chest was bugged. But man, like it sucks that they even like include items like this when like I know I'm never going to see it. Like I don't know. There's just I don't even care. This could be like infinitely broken. Really wouldn't even care. But the fact that it's so rare and it's not even that interesting is like why just add this to the game, let people play with it. Then with the malignant hearts, 32 of them added to the game, and it's basically just legendary gems, but they're not even that interesting. Like I looked, I saw like less than 5 that I thought were like, oh wow, this is actually something I really want to play around with. This is something I could like see myself making a build around. Most of them are just boring, like really really boring and just not that inspiring to play around with. Probably the worst one I saw that, in my opinion, this is unacceptable, but there's a Sorcerer Malignant Heart that gives you resistance to elements, and they're not even planning on fixing resistant to elements until next season. Currently, it does like no DR at all. How is this how is this acceptable to release an item like this into the game that just fundamentally doesn't work? To me, this is like if they released a Barbarian Malignant Heart that said like your Hammer of the Ancients does 4 more damage. How is that okay? This is like this shouldn't be, this just shouldn't be happening. It's not going to get fixed until next season anyway. So really, I don't understand how something like this is happening. And this kind of brings me to like my main thesis, where sometimes I feel like there's 2 different teams at Diablo 4 that are like working completely async from each other. They're just like they're doing their own thing and just like adding in patches with like no communication, because some of the changes that they're making, it feels like they're not even like coordinated. I'm not even sure what they're trying to do with these changes. They're actually like actively working against themselves in a lot of ways. Um, they've also added like a bunch of these, as why I call it the quality of death patch. They just added these like random things that like, who asked for experience nerfs? Was this really a problem? Like, were people really leveling to 100 too fast for them? I don't understand that. I don't get the experience nerfs at all. And granted, the original XP formula was pretty damn weird. It is kind of weird that you're getting 15% extra bonus for one enemy level higher, but now you get 15% bonus max for 10 levels higher. So you have to fight something 10 levels higher than you to get the same percent bonus as 1 level higher than you. What? How does that make any sense? How is that incentivizing you to push for harder content? All it's doing is punishing you for like doing this. It's so weird. Like I don't understand this at all. They also decided to try to fix level scaling by making monsters, well, they still scale. They scale to like -5 of your level. I don't understand this at all. I feel like this is just going to make the open world feel really bad, because experience also scales negatively by monsters that are lower level than you. So if you're outscaling your like the open world, right? There's nothing you can really do. You can't like push yourself into harder content. All you have to do is like go into a nightmare dungeon, and I guess that's what they want. They just want everybody just doing nightmare dungeons from level 50 to level 100. Hell tides are, they're kind of nerfing them too by making it more difficult, and they have less of a reward because mystery chests now cost more. So you're not even incentivized to do hell tides anymore. What like I'm just so confused by this change. It feels like they crafted this beautiful open world, and now they're like, you know what? Screw all that. Spend your eternity in nightmare dungeons. That's all you're doing now, because it's the only thing worth doing. It's the only thing that's going to give you like experience at all. I am honestly, I'm so shook by these changes. They buffed Tree of Whispers, but why would you go do Tree of Whispers in the open world when the open world is 5 levels lower than you? That doesn't make any sense. I'm truly baffled by these changes. It does not make sense to me. Finally, if all of that wasn't bad enough or didn't make you just throw up question marks, they increased the teleport out of dungeon from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. And when I read this, I really had to stop and like think like, okay, well, where's like the curtain pull? Like, what is happening here? Like, why would they just do that? Who's affected by this? Were like hardcore players like cheesing out of bosses or something like that? They have the scroll of escape, so who cares? This just feels like they're just artificially padding out the game, making it slower. Maybe they think that people are hitting end game too fast and they don't like that people are like getting to the end game. But really, that's the only thing I can think about, that they're trying to just slow down the game so people don't realize how miserable the end game experience in Diablo 4 really is. And that's a hard thing to say. And I do love the game, but when I see a patch that's like this bad, that is this nonsensical in terms of the quality of life changes, and that has really nothing that anybody asked for, it makes me feel like the feedback delivered by the community is on like a 3 month delay at this point. Where like if I see feedback about a thing, I'm not expecting that to get changed until the next season or maybe even the season after that, because this is like an unreal change that like I don't understand how how this had to go through so many people and nobody was like, okay, this is like a little ridiculous. Like, why are we even adding this? So I'm curious what they say in the fireside chat on Friday. But right now, season one, it's kind of looking like a huge L. I'm not particularly excited for it. I'm still gonna play it because I mean I do want to see what the game feels like with all the changes, all the damage changes. Maybe the game actually does feel better now that it's like now that you do no damage to stuff. Um, but I'm really hoping that this is like a wake up call for the Blizzard devs, and they start making some pretty massive changes. And this, I think the changes have to start happening now. I don't think it's okay to wait until season two, because you can't write off the first season of a major game like this. That's not acceptable to me. This is stuff that needs to get fixed in like the next 2 weeks, in my opinion. Not wait until season two, wait until season three. Because I've been in that cycle with Blizzard before, and it's pretty miserable. So, yep, those are my thoughts. I'm sorry it's a pretty negative video, but honestly, it was a pretty negative patch, so it's hard for me to like scrape out the positives from it. I love Diablo 4. I think it's a great. It was like a great foundation, but instead of building on top of the foundation, it seems like they're chiseling away at the good stuff that's there. And I don't know. That makes me a little bit pessimistic for the future. Um, Hopefully, you know, the season comes out, I'll have some more fun videos kind of showcasing what I'm doing. I am really excited to play Rogue because Rogue kind of evaded a lot of the nerfs. Uh, but yeah, it's a tough road ahead for Diablo right now. And I hope it gets better. So thanks for watching, guys. Good luck in season one.